was the 1,000 foot reduced down to a 500 foot from the schools, and basically because I live right next to Levitt Lake Park, that pretty much counts me out, but I do have a neighbor that's here that is willing to allow to be my caregiver so I can grow my allowable amount of plants. The other thing is the discretion that you had there as far as the count, and you had it 12 and 20, or what was that, 6 and 10?
Yes.
People are going to take advantage of the maximum amount of numbers, so let's just set one number for this. I think it would be less argument when it comes down to the ordinance and coordination with the police department or the abatement office, whoever is going to handle this task. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. And it will come down to one number. These are just ideas right now.
I understand that.
That number was selected as a kind of range from which to begin the discussion. That's the only purpose that was put in there.
Ken, let me ask you a question.
Sure.
What should we do if this problem grows?
Well, as you see, none of them's here standing behind this ordinance at all and trying to work this out. Only the licensed people that I see here time after time at the city council meetings too.
Right.
Same thing. We're trying to create an ordinance and work with the city and the county just to protect our rights to grow.
Right.
And like I said, these few bad people is what's created this whole issue.
Absolutely.
And I believe that bottom line is ban the 99 plant growth. All other cities have done that, but still allows you to grow a reasonable amount for yourself.
In kind of point of clarification, I was here for the November, I've been here for each of the discussions that we've had on this, and my recollection is a little bit different. My recollection is although some of these parcels had a high number of plants, we've grabbed this 99 number, and I don't know that I don't think that they've all had 90, they've got a pretty decent high plant count, but the issue isn't so much the high plant count per parcel, it's the fact that there's quite a few plants in close proximity to the neighbor. That's the issue, and or other neighbors around. It's the proximity of, a landholder, whether they're an owner or a resident or living in an RV or whatever, engaging in an activity that affects somebody close by. That's the narrow issue, and not necessarily the 99, even though I think it's fair to conclude from the comments that we received at the previous study sessions that the Lake Forest, that the Janesville, that some of the other parcels were kind of high plant counts, whether it was 99 or not, I know not. So.
One other thing is, and this is going to cross the thing, and this is what the city's asking right now too, and planning has addressed it too. As far as setbacks from schools and daycares and stuff like that, what happens if someone creates and doesn't like you growing and decides that they're going to open a daycare right next door to you to ban you from growing in your own yard? I think that there should be some kind of
That's a pretty onerous
How do you deal with
product to come up with. You got to be state certified. I mean, you're just not going to open up a daycare with a
Well, I
certified
understand
daycare.
that, but then you've got some neighbors that are highly against this.
So I've heard this, and I don't know if it's true or not, and I don't understand enough about growing marijuana or growing anything for that matter. I got a brown thumb. Is it true that if there's a beehive nearby that it can, pollinate your plants or do something and kill them off? Is there something to that?
I think. I don't really know.
Rumor is that most insects can cross-pollinate plants, but you got to have a male plant within usually a 5 mile radius around you.
So what was reported to me was that there's some kind of little cottage industry popping up where a guy will sell you a beehive, and if you don't like the neighbor growing his pot, you can put your beehive next to the fence, and it'll pollinate his plants and kill them off.
There's a possibility, it won't kill them off, but you'll have a lot of seeds in the plant. What it does, it causes the plant to warm.
And you don't smoke, huh?
I don't.
Thank you. Okay. All right. How much time you want to spend on this?
Well, my hope, Mr. Chairman, is to get some clear consensus today that would make a step forward in defining where we're going with this thing, because I think we'll probably come time to that.
One thing I just want to bring to the board's attention, and I know Aaron will be in Sacramento tomorrow at the RCRC meeting, representing the board there, but they have on their agenda, one of the agenda items is reviewing and discussing the marijuana legislation, and in their agenda packet, they identify, looks like 5 bills that are federally have been introduced in the current session of the legislature, and they range across the board in terms of dealing with some of the very issues that we're talking about here with this ordinance. And so I think it would, and they got copies of these bills attached in the packet. There's quite a section of it. I'll endeavor to, while Aaron's gone, I know he's got a packet, is to make copies of these pages. I think it's worth looking at and seeing what the discussions are, because if any of these bills were to be adopted, it could very well either preempt or circumvent or do whatever to what we're doing in terms of our ordinance. And they'd be doing it on a statewide basis. In fact, one of the things I saw was going to create a regulatory framework for medical marijuana. So something they've been trying to do since 215 passed, and they tried probably to do when 420 passed. And when it's been 10 or 12 years of, I would say, helter-skelter down there in Sacramento. But a lot of this is driven when you read the narrative, is they're expecting at least one, if not more, ballot measures in November 2016, which will address the issue of recreational use of marijuana. And of course, I think if they can't get their hands on how they're going to regulate the land use aspect of it, I mean, the legal aspect is kind of already a foregone conclusion, but as we deal with the land use aspects in terms of how the various competing interests in the communities live with each other, and that is of great interest to the people living at Lake Forest. And most of the testimony we've received, people say, we're not going to fight about the issue of whether we should or shouldn't do medical marijuana. They know it's here, but if it's here, it's got to live in harmony with all the other interests within the community, and that's where this board has to kind of, I guess, weigh in and deal with it. That's what that regulatory process, and if the state doesn't have it figured out by November 2016, I kind of think that after that it's going to be the Wild West, and we can have all the whiskey drinking and water fighting. There's going to be a bigger battle going on. So I found this kind of interesting reading this last night, and I know Aaron will probably take good notes and report back next week. what happened? I'm putting a lot of pressure on you. I probably should have got this packet out and read it ahead of time. Anyway, I found it fascinating, and I'll work while Aaron's gone to make copies, get copies for me, so that staff can do that, maybe even get a copy to the clerk's office so she can maybe even post it up there so the general public can access it, because it's good information.
And so back to the board. May I make inquiry of this board if it's the desire of the board to adopt the kind of one-size-fits-all approach to conditions of cultivation, or is it the desire of this board to adopt a sort of tiered approach? Whatever values we plug into that in a few minutes, if that's where we go. Tiered. All right.
Personally, I don't like the tiered approach. If you don't mind, I'll just run through some of my things that I'd like
Yes,
to
sir.
do real quick.
Yes, sir.
Going to page 2 on letter G, we talk about premises,
Catch up.
10,000 feet of premises.
Okay, say again.
On G,
Yes, sir.
cultivation, non-marijuana, that locates the premises within 1,000 feet of schools.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to see public parks added there as well.
Yes, and we've spoken of that. And
As well as places of businesses.
places of business.
Yeah. I don't know, I'm just thinking, we'll use Tom's example with his store. If he has somebody going from 500 feet of his store and the others go in there, I mean, Tom's really not going to necessarily want that in his place, you know, with the other stuff. Just something to think about.
He does sell Doritos.
Okay, so,
It doesn't mix well with Slurpees, so.
let me just,
I actually do have a grow right next to
okay, so I'm going to put that down in the category, Mr. Supervisor, as you're promoting that change. Certainly, if there's 3 to 5 of you that would endorse that, then, I'll do it the way you want it. I'm here to serve at the pleasure of the board. My caution would be this. Is I can understand the public parks issue. Place of business, there are so many places that occur. You would effectively be drawing a 1,000-foot zone, which would shade in, maybe this is an exaggeration, but most of Lassen County. Truly.
Because we had the issue out on Johnsonville Road where we had a daycare facility like 2
Yes.
doors down from that one that was
Yes, sir.
there. So if you're going to have schools, or we're going to talk about, parks, I think are important, but daycare facilities. And another one may be, we had a gentleman talking earlier today, he was talking about his church and for 18 years, and it's even with the Genesis 129 and everything, so
Yes.
it's going to include churches.
Well, that's the board's prerogative. So we're into the exclusion zone. We're not necessarily reviewing currently the tiered versus one-size-fits-all. If you want to do churches, parks, daycare, I think what I would probably do is I would include that in the final draft that is presented to this group, and depending on what we can get 3 votes on, I would excise whatever we can.
Okay, go ahead, Aaron.
And then on the indoors, on page 3, under definitions of
Yes, sir.
indoors.
Yes, sir.
One question that came up to me was just with Dennis, with his
Yes.
situation. Would a travel trailer be considered indoors if you were to grow indoors under this definition?
It wouldn't be, if you read this definition, it wouldn't include it, but I think.
I think not.
I think you need to add a definition about greenhouses, and that goes back to what Randy was talking about, and that exchange there as something separate from an indoor thing. I think that deserves a definite one, and I think maybe a travel trailer should be, I'm going to let us on that.
I think the building code probably doesn't apply to a travel trailer, and therefore you can't really be consistent with something that doesn't apply.
Well, if we create a greenhouse one as a kind of as being separate from indoor, maybe we can create a travel trailer one as another set aside.
Quick, just to clarify and mention something. The gentleman that was talking about the trailer, he's completely right. Indoor cultivation requires a lot of money, a big investment right up front, especially if you don't already have the detached up to code building. And that costs money as well as the lights and everything. So it all is a huge expense. And then I just want to clarify about with the whole 99 thing. Everybody is on this 99, like 99, everyone's allowed to grow 99. The Kelly decision specifically stated that you can grow whatever within a reasonable amount for your medical needs. It does not say 99. It does not give the doctor any legal justification to recommend that you grow 99. He's actually, by law, not supposed to recommend an amount.
Dennis is our best expert. He told us at the vet salon that he smokes a lot of pot, and 10 plants is the most anybody needs.
But he's only saying for smoking as well. You know, he's talking about smoking as well. And you use a lot more, like I had explained at the last meeting, you use a lot more when you're eating it raw. So, I mean, to say 10 plants is across the board good for everybody, can't really say. If somebody's smoking, maybe, but somebody might not be wanting to be intoxicated and is eating it completely raw. And in that case, takes an extreme amount. It's not something that's a very, very small amount. But I just want to clarify the thing with the Kelly decision. The doctors are not supposed to actually give you a recommendation for plant limit. You're supposed to figure that out.
We know that the 99 plant number, because we've had this conversation on multiple occasions, comes from the federal sentencing guidelines and the U.S. Attorney's interest in prosecuting a case that's actually going to result in some deterrent prison time.
It was the
And
Attorney
that's
General that made that flat statement of 100 plants or more.
100 plants or more, so-
That's why 99 all of a sudden became.
But I want to keep this conversation going in the direction of making decisions. And so, Mr. Chairman, may I ask we return to Mr. Elmore?
And we'll go down to, turn to page 4, conditions of approval.
Page 4.
Conditions of cultivation.
Conditions for cultivation,
Yes,
yes.
conditions of cultivation, excuse me. If you go to number C here, again, you'd want to add your parks and churches and daycares.
Yep.
And then, we would go on down to C, the same thing again, you would add that under number 1, C1.
I thought you were just referring to C1.
Well, the heading of C,
Yes?
you would add public parks and churches.
Yes.
And you go on down to number 1, which, you know, the boundary line of the premises which the school is located, you need to
Yes.
add parks, you need to add that there too. And then, as far as number 2 goes, with the 41 acres of size, I would say anything less than 41 acres is indoor only, and then if you own 41 acres or greater, then you can go outdoors.
So you're talking about the tiered approach to limits in terms of indoor or outdoor.
Indoor, outdoor.
So you're saying less than 41?
Indoor only, and 41 and greater, you can go outdoor
With the restrictions.
with, right, and then
Okay.
with those restrictions.
Outdoor or indoor? Okay.
And then, we go on down to the number of plants. You know, we've heard testimony a lot, and I think the 6 to 10 number is high, in my opinion. And I would like to see that lower to maybe 4 or 6. And then leave that 4 to 6 all the way through, even the number 3. So the 4 to 6 would be the maximum number of plants.
So 4 to 6 plants, maximum permissible
Per
number of plants?
Per card user, and then you can go up to 2, so you double that. So it would be
Okay.
8 to 12 would be the maximum number of plants per card.
Okay.
And then if you go on over to number,
But that's like you saying that we pass an ordinance that limits your hay cutting to just 1 or 2 cuttings,
Well,
and not 3 or 4.
but if you go indoors.
I can see
you
a
go
lot of
indoors to the
lawsuits
greenhouse,
coming there.
You can double crop that stuff pretty easy. Double crop.
Okay.
And then if we go on to the fence, the opaque fence at 6 feet in height, what's the maximum height we can have?
I thought it was 6 foot. Maximum fence height permissible?
The maximum fence height was 6. It was changed last year to 7.
Well, let's use the
And
maximum.
that's caveat, that's an answer that it depends on the zone and other things, but generally speaking, you don't get a building permit.
Which page are you
up to
guys
7 feet.
5.
But depending on where you live in Canton, you may have
A 6 foot
CCNRs that limit you to wildlife type fence or some other.
For example, in our zones, you have a requirement that fences not exceed 3 feet in front yard, all the way back to the setback line. So that's an example of how, generally speaking, it's up to 7 feet without a permit now. But there are different
Without a
things that
permit?
impact that.
Yes.
So anyways, I see one is that being a little tough to do, but maybe, I don't know, if we're gonna have that, should we keep the plant height below the top of the fence line? It's a question to throw out. And then we've also heard testimony, and the reason why I say with those lower numbers is because we've had, over the course of this time, we've had people give testimony, you know, that whatever their growers don't grow, they sell them as sticks. And that isn't what we're doing. We're not doing this for profit, it's for medical use only. It's not to sell food for profit to dispensaries, and so I don't think we need to advertise that. Anyway, those were the changes I had. Oh, and then on page 10, I think that $250 to $500, I say we need to change that, and just make that up to $1,000. The administrative penalty up to $1,000 at the discretion of the administrative officer, or however you want to word that.
The enforcing officer as sustained by the hearing officer. You know, the enforcing officer would only propose it the hearing officer would have to find that it's warranted. And it's discretionary up to and including that.
And
Those would be right.
if I could add one more to that, Mr. Chairman, and that is going to the very last page where it talks about misdemeanor stuff. I really think we should have a debate or discussion about to what extent we want to, I guess, criminalize this whole thing anyway. And I can see where maybe through the administrative process, if they, if they shine you on 3 or 5 times and set some sort of a threshold, and that created a more serious offense. And I think it goes back to that hierarchy where you have felony, misdemeanors, infractions, and how the administrative penalty process fits in there. So when you have a cumulative effect, maybe that might lead to upping the bar. But I think for just most of the brother-in-law stuff, just right off the bat, it says right there, any infractions of this, any violation of this chapter is a misdemeanor. So even the stuff that's handled through the administrative penalty
Could be prosecuted.
Could be. Yeah. And I'm not sure. I feel like I mean, the trend society had 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago, dealing with this kind of a drug that was on that list. I mean, society came down pretty hard. But I would say at a fast-moving pace, we're seeing the decriminalizing at least this particular drug is being. And when we get to the recreational stuff next year, this idea that's old school. And I mean, society has got to the point now where it doesn't matter.
So let me ask a question, if I may. Is there consensus on the board to limit outdoor growing from 0 acres to a certain number of acres?
I don't think so. Not from my standpoint.
Okay.
Somebody like Dennis, how big is your forest?
3.9.
4 acres.
I think when you get into the residential, when you define residential area, you have like Lake Forest, residential lot. I think that's something, that's you're talking about very small, half acre, maybe.
Correct.
You might have some parcels that might be a little bit larger than that. And when you get into those kind of settings where you have a concentration of houses and small, I think that is
Almost like city lots.
Yeah, like city lots. I think subdivisions. I mean, that would probably be true even like with Lovett Lake and stuff. I think in those kind of settings, we have to look at that as a serious thing. But once you get outside of the bounds of that, it's not fair.
So I'm glad that you mentioned that, Mr. Supervisor, because I made a specific request to the community, almost said it, Planning and Building Services Director, to try and make an evaluation if there's like an average parcel size in some of these smaller subdivisions. So if we did a 0 to X number of acres, what might be that X value so that we could alleviate these issues where people are living in such close proximity?
0 to maybe 3/4 of an acre.
And did you reach a conclusion there, Mr. Anderson?
Well, you spoke to it earlier. If you were to say you can only do whatever on parcels over an acre, you would effectively get Westwood, Lake Forest, Wood Proper, Beaver, New Beaver, Spalding, definitely Spalding. So, the 1 acre threshold covers a lot.
Why do we even have to mess with an acreage? Why don't we be specific about, we have town centers as defined in terms of actually being, and we enumerate in the ordinance the towns that are.
Well, I considered that approach as well, and tried to ascertain whether or not there is a if I could define it like in terms of the township of Westwood, if that had a specific boundary to it, the township of Lake Forest, if that had a specific boundary.
Well, you have a subdivision map that was filed for Lake Forest, and so I think in several of those instances, you would have to look at that as being the basis. Now, maybe you have community service districts or some other kind of district boundary that could be utilized in organized areas, but
And so I was examining the different ways that I could define that, and I'll tell you really what I came back to, having this left to me to float an idea, for lack of a better way of putting it, is is the sheriff's position, and that is that folks need to know what the rule is easily, what applies to them. I think that there is difficulty in terms of citizens having a 14-page ordinance passed with a list of different subdivisions that might or might not apply to them, and then they're required to go examine that. I know ignorance of the law is no excuse. Certainly I've used that as a prosecutor on many occasions. But in fairness, my preference, do what the board wants and serve at your pleasure, would be to have more easily well-defined boundaries, if you will.
Yeah, I think we need to have some defined boundaries, but if you just throw it out there like 3/4 of an acre, whatever, what you're going to have is you could find yourself having a developed area where you might have 70% of them that fall into it, but you have pockets in the middle.
No question.
And then all of a sudden now that's what you're concerned about in terms of clarity is now confused, because if you get Adiga Terrace, rest her soul,
Yes.
rest in peace. I mean, she had a fairly large undeveloped area, and Susanville had grown pretty much around it. She eventually got annexed in, and she fought it, until she died. But there again, you have an example. So you have all this urbanization, but then you have, this big undeveloped area right in the middle of it. And so do you want to make it within 1,000 feet if you use that as the boundary of an area? So you want to have some setbacks. So you have a developed little community like Lake Forest, so you can't let them grow. But what about the guy who's right outside that area of a large parcel? So you want to make it 1,000 feet or whatever, within the confines where you would have a defined community. Those are the things you're going to have to sort out.
Well, I have come to the conclusion that there's not going to be a perfect ordinance. There is not going to be a perfect ordinance.
They always say making laws is like watching sausage.
Yes.
I agree with, and this is the first vote. And if it were the case that our town centers were defined, which some are and some are not, I would agree that that would be an approach. But based on the fact that like Doyle is an undefined town center, Ravendale, Beaver,
But you don't put them on the list if at first. You only focus on the areas, and then maybe as time goes on, if a problem erupts in one of the areas that's not on the list, then the board at that time can take a look at it, and maybe for definitions there, they come up with something and they get eventually added to the list.
We'll do as the board says, but as a friend of law enforcement and a friend of my people, the acreage approach would, I think, right now probably be the best option. And, I think one of you said it right, that's why I agree with both of you, is it's going to be the best of two approaches that aren't going to be perfect. And I think the acreage right now would probably be the most clear to law enforcement, the most clear to code enforcement, and the health department.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Burns, go ahead and pass what.
Well, my question simply was, is there consensus from the board related to banning outdoor growing from 0 acres to some number? I know Supervisor Hammond had a concern about that, and I'm wondering if that is 1 of 5 or if that's 3 of 5. I don't know.
Hawk was wanting to ban grows in Cutler Grove and Lake Forest, so you said.
Well, no, if you've got a medical marijuana card, you can grow up to 6 where you want to use.
Outdoors on any size parcel in the county?
On the smallest parcels, we have to come up with a limit.
Okay. So,
There's no limit on, just a limited number of plants.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
I mean, everybody's not going to have a card if you go on.
okay. So the answer is you don't support banning outdoor grows even on the smallest of parcels, like Lake Forest?
No, not if you meet the criteria to have your medical use for your.
Okay. All right. Very good. And so, that would essentially, does that mean to say then, Mr. Chairman, that you would support the tiered approach where on parcels of 0 to X number of acres, whatever that X number is, you would support indoor outdoor growing in a small amount, but from X number of acres to Y number of acres, whatever those numbers are, you would support a larger number, and from Y on, an even larger number beyond that, indoors or out? Okay. Okay.
What setbacks? Put it in the greenhouse, though. With setbacks.
And I think we're going backwards, guys. I think we're opening this up to sell the dispensaries and making it a for-profit.
No, it's not dispensary.
So,
The only issue I have is if you throw in a caregiver with more people in the truck, and you're growing like, maybe you got 6 people you're growing for, you're growing 6 plants a piece, that's a co-op, whatever, caregiver.
collective, whatever.
That with up to 80 plants that you are, I said 2,000 feet, but we could come down a little bit, from a resident. That's the issue. People don't like these 60, 70, 80 plants in someone's backyard over the fence.
Yeah.
That's what I'm against, and that's what we gotta stop.
Me too.
Maybe 15, make it a quarter mile, 1,200 feet, I don't care. But we do not want that next to somebody's home.
That's where we get the problem.
So,
That's what we got.
can I ask a question? Is there someone on the board that can state a consensus for me?
Mr. Piles, the chairman.
Thank you.
Mr. Piles is around. You're signing stuff.
I'm tired and hungry.
It's been a long meeting, there's no question, and it was my hope to move.
Randy's not that kind of hungry either.
I'd like to make.
I saw this. Look how ready he was. I saw that smile. He lit right up.
Where we at?
He needs a consensus on acreage in the plant, right? Yes. So if we go 0 to 10 acres with a 6-plant limit,
I want to put 6 plants on any acre. 6 plants limit on any acre. Where do you, I don't know, I'm not sure how you get there.
0 to 10 acres, we have a 6-plant limit.
So on any parcel, you can grow 6 plants.
Indoors or out?
Indoors or out?
Per patient or total per person?
Total proportion, 12 plants. 12 plants.
Discussion being held.
Let me know.
Will do.
12 plants total ones on 10 acres or less.
Okay.
That way we don't have what happened in Lake Forest, we don't know what happened in James.
And that takes care of Dennis because he gets us 10 plants.
Okay, keep going, good.
Then 10 to 40, we up that number. We just double it.
We have it to what?
We double that, just double that number.
But without a setback.
With the setback.
With setbacks.
Okay, did you keep the 1,280-foot setback on 40 acres?
Can't do it.
Can't do it. Much.
No, but on a 10 to 40 acre parcel, if you have a 50-foot setback, you know,
You could do even a couple 100-foot setback.
yeah, a 200-foot setback there,
And how many plants?
24.
12 to 24.
12 to 24 plant plants. Total 24 plants.
Would we say 500-foot setback or 200-foot setback?
Go 200 feet.
Say 100 and 200.
On 200 feet.
Say 100.
100 foot.
And then 40
40 on,
max number of
80
plants?
plants.
How many?
40 acres, I'm sorry, 41 acres, you can have 80 plants, and you set back.
Why 80? Where does this 80 come from? The most we talked about the other day was, well, it was like 72, and there was.
Oh, 72.
80 works out, if you figure the 6 plant per person kind of as a general rule, that's 13.333% persons. So, yeah, do something that's,
72.
okay, 72 makes more sense.
72.
And I think that came from, I think that Randy said 72.
It's all his fault.
So we're gonna, everybody who's replaced, do you have a card?
I'm gonna be in trouble.
Do you have a card? Because everybody who's replaced, I'm gonna give them your phone.
Let's bring it back. Let's bring it back. If you have one.
the house, you could only be 1,000 feet from the residence. No,
Well, 1,020 feet, because your neighbor's got to have a 20-foot setback from their own property line. We did not discuss a setback on the smaller parcels.
Yes,
10 feet?
that would be more.
0 to 10 acres.
0 to 10
Setback.
acre setback. What's a building, 20 feet for a building?
Well, there's two setbacks. There's the fire code, which is 30 feet for structure, so that's not just mentioned. The zoning setback in the R zone is 20 feet in front, I think it's 15 in the back, and it's 10% of the lot width.
10% of the what?
Lot width. Not to exceed 15 feet.
Could I just suggest 10 feet, because we do have some very small parcels in the county?
Yes. We're getting there. It's a painful process.
I have a question. We talked about 72 plants, but we've already sort of agreed that if you're growing, that people need to be living there.
Yes.
So 72
Or
plants.
be a caregiver.
Yeah, correct.
So could a caregiver be growing for someone who's not living there?
Right.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
Yes.
That's what Randy does.
And a collection, he's a caregiver for multiple patients and has a stack of recs and can grow for all of those people within the scope of those recommendations and whatever this ordinance contemplates.
Yeah. So could I recap where we've got? So thank you. So on any parcel, 6 plants, you get 12, up to 12 plants with a 10-foot setback. With a 10 to 40 acre parcel, 24 plants with a 100-foot setback. 40 plus acre parcel, 72 plants with a 1,000-foot setback. Now,
Well, gee, how many feet you got? 40 acres, square is what? Quarter mile by quarter mile. That's 1,280 feet.
but well, hold on just a
That ain't
second.
gonna work.
So I guess the question is, if you have that 40 acre parcel and you only want to grow 6 plants because that's all you just want for your personal use, do you then go back to the lower setbacks? Because you don't have a major grow, you only have 6 plants, you just happen to have a 40 acre parcel.
Well, I think
We were getting somewhere.
Yeah, we were.
I think 12 plants in the residential area across the country, I think 6 is I think you have to double everything. You should do 6 and 12.
But there's
Not 12 and 20.
two medical
There's
marijuana
2
uses
patients.
out.
If it's 2 patients, then you should be a co-op growing, and you should be 2,000 feet from the nearest home. And I'll come down that 2,000 feet.
I guess my point is, if you may have somebody that has 1,000 acres that only wants to grow their 2 plants.
Well, he can do it. They can do it.
What if their garden is 500 feet from their neighbor? And they can't do it. So they need to do a on-site segregation. Okay.
That's more money for the county.
Okay.
Just food for thought. The parking lot problem. Got 5 parcels that are all 200 plus acres in size. But the homes share an access. And the homes are all within 100 yards of each other. And despite the fact that you have 500 acres, you have 5 houses going crazy with each other about parking lot. Just throwing it out.
But your garden has to now be
Right.
1,000 feet from your property line. So therefore, 2,000 feet from garden to garden.
And you only got 1,000 feet from the school? You don't have 1,000 feet from the school?
Well, we're not talking about that component of it yet. I think that will also be.
Yeah, but when you have 1,000 feet from the school, and now you want to go 2,000 feet from a dwelling?
1,000 feet from the neighbor's residence, from the neighbor's house.
You're really not 1,000 feet from the residence.
Mr. Chairman, you pay me to be candid with you, and I'm going to be candid with you, and I'm going to tell you that I think the 1,000-foot exclusion, not from the school or the parks or the like, I think a 1,000-foot exclusion is, yeah, I think it's extreme. You're paying me to be playing with you? I'm going to be
Well,
playing with you.
if you're gonna have 80 plants, and you do a caretaker, I don't think it is extreme, not a thousand.
If you're at 100 foot on the 10 to 40, that, and it's 100 feet with the setback.
Yeah.
I think if you're gonna be over 40, I think you could maybe enlarge that to probably a couple hundred feet, but I think 1,000 is a lot.
I think 1,000 from the nearest residence from where those 80 plants are planted is what it has to be.
Because of the nature of the 80 plants, not because of anything else.
Is that the consensus of the board, though?
But again, let me just raise this issue again. You may have that
We're not talking about 80,
40
we're
parcel
talking about 72.
where the individual only wants to grow their 6 plants.
What's that one more time?
Well, you may have, maybe Aaron wants to grow 6 plants. Does he also need 1,000 foot setback?
No.
Because that's not what you've been saying. So if you,
No, the 6 plants for yourself, you go up across the fence. You make 4.
it's only when you get it, it's plant
Only when
population
you
driven,
become a
not parcel size. Good, okay.
But, no,
What you're saying is providing, if you're, what he's explaining is anything over 6 plants, you become a cooperative. No. The way it's gonna work.
Dealing with 12, we'll get 3 to 6 rows.
12 plants.
So I'm going to do the best I can to import these changes to the conditions of cultivation component of it and re-present it to you.
Yeah.
And
With some numbers attached.
And we will be back to pick you apart.
We expect you to.
Well, I could just
We'd be
add
really
something-
disappointed if you weren't here.
If I could just add something about the 40 acres. 40 acres, like you said, is about a quarter mile by a quarter mile, so that'd be about 200 feet. But like I mentioned before, if you don't have a perfectly square property, it's more of a rectangle, that might effectively eliminate the 40-acre parcel. Just add 1,000 feet, just because that's close to the quarter mile by quarter mile 40-acre parcel would be when it is square, you know.
Randy, don't you agree that if you're a caregiver of property, if you got 80 plants, that
72.
that you should be at least 1,000 feet from a family?
I completely agree that it should be out of sight and shouldn't be close enough where they're getting a serious smell in their face over it. So I mean, just
I think they have that right.
I think, in my opinion, about 500 to 750 feet would make it so that if the property isn't perfectly square, it would still be.
You already beat me down from 2,000 to 1,000.
He's whittling on you, Bob.
Hey, I got to
Johnson, do you have enough direction?
we'll see you next week.
Thank you, guys.
Mr. Chairman, I know this is a time-sensitive matter, and it's my hope to do it by next week, but I also have a litigation issue that's due Monday for filing in court, and I'm not ready on that. So I'm going to try for next week, but there's no guarantee, sir.
Good enough. Mr. Egan, did you have anything to say over
yeah, 2 quick things. One, I got a slightly different definition from council on the term gore, and mine is blood that has been shed, especially as a result of violence.
That's only being changed.
But we'll go with that definition. Other than that, happy St. Patrick's Day.